Okay, so you want to talk about transgender individuals serving in the U.S. military?
Yeah, this is something that keeps coming up.
Yeah, and for good reason, right?
Definitely. It's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
Little.
So specifically, we're going to dive into this new Pentagon memo.
Right.
That CBS News article you sent me.
Yeah, that was a good one.
It was, so we're going to break it down. We're going to look at the history of how we even got here.
Okay.
And try to understand what it all means.
Yeah.
For the people who are, being affected by this directly.
I think it's a situation with a lot of layers.
Right.
And a lot of potential consequences.
Yeah. Okay, so to start us off, what is at the core of this Pentagon memo? What is it saying?
Well, it says that transgender troops will be removed from the military within 30 days unless they obtain a waiver.
Okay.
But it's the details of that waiver process,
right.
that are raising concerns.
Because it's not just like a blanket waiver for anyone. This is all case by case, right?
Exactly, yeah.
What does that even look like in practice, case by case?
Basically, it means that there's a very high bar that's been set to even be considered.
Right.
The memo says a service member has to have no history of transitioning.
Okay.
They have to show 36 continuous months of what they call stability, and they have to demonstrate that their continued service is in the compelling government interest.
Oh, wow. So those are big, right?
Those are some loaded terms. Right?
Yeah. Stability just jumps out right away.
Yeah.
How do you define that?
Exactly.
Especially in this context. And who even gets to decide what stable means?
Right.
And what about the other one? Compelling government interest.
Yeah.
What would even count as that when it comes to someone's gender identity and their military service?
I think that's what a lot of legal experts are trying to sort out. Right now. There's a lot of room for interpretation,
Oh, yeah.
And that lack of clarity, I think, is really causing a lot of anxiety for a lot of people who are currently serving.
Yeah. And this isn't the first time, obviously.
No, definitely not.
That transgender military service has made headlines.
Right.
We've seen a lot of back and forth on this.
It's been a real roller coaster. Like a roller coaster of policy changes.
Yeah, in recent years especially.
Yeah, and going back, back in 2016 under Obama, the ban on transgender individuals serving, it was lifted.
Okay, so a move toward inclusivity.
Yes. Yeah, and there were even plans to start accepting transgender recruits.
Right.
In 2017.
Okay.
But then, of course, the Trump administration came in.
Right.
And they postponed that implementation date. And then eventually reversed the policy entirely.
So a big shift.
It was a big shift.
That must have been so disruptive.
Oh, for sure.
For people
who
were ready to serve openly,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then, of course, Biden reversed those Trump-era restrictions.
Exactly, yeah.
When he came into office, right away, right?
Yeah, 2021.
Yeah. So transgender people could serve openly again.
Yeah, they could.
But now here we are again.
Yep.
Back to Trump.
Yeah.
In 2025 in this new executive order.
Right.
And this memo, it's another policy reversal.
Right. It feels like.
Yeah.
We're back to square one.
It really does. But with even more uncertainty this time, I feel like.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What was the reason given for this? For this reversal, the memo doesn't really dive into the why.
It doesn't really.
Yep.
But the executive order itself states, and I'm quoting directly here, expressing a false gender identity divergent from an individual's sex cannot satisfy the rigorous standards necessary for military service.
False gender identity.
Yeah.
That's loaded.
It is. Yeah, it's really loaded.
That wording is very, very carefully chosen.
Yeah, and it just raises a lot of questions. What does false gender identity even mean?
Right.
And how does that frame this whole issue of transgender service?
Yeah.
And what impact could this language have on transgender people who are already serving?
Right.
Who are putting their lives on the line.
It makes me think back to don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's a really relevant comparison.
Yeah. And all the harm that did.
Yeah. There are definitely parallels to be drawn.
Yeah.
Both in terms of the policy itself and the potential impact on, on people.
It's like history repeating itself.
Yeah, it does feel like that.
But in a slightly different form.
A little bit, yeah. I think it does raise concerns.
Yeah.
About where we're heading, in the bigger picture of LGBTQ plus rights.
Right.
And the ongoing fight for equality and all that. But I feel like we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here.
Right. Right. Yeah, we still need to, like, unpack.
Yeah. The specifics of this new policy.
For sure.
Before we do, though,
yeah,
like, I wanted to take a second to connect this back to you,
okay,
the listener.
okay.
You know, why does all of this even matter?
Yeah, good question.
Because it's not just about,
Right.
legal stuff.
Abstract legal arguments,
Yeah.
and policy debates.
Yeah, policy debates. This is about real people,
It is.
their lives, their careers,
Right, exactly.
their sense of self.
Yeah, it speaks to larger questions, I think,
Okay.
about inclusion and diversity.
Yeah.
And what it means to serve your country.
Right.
It's a conversation about core values.
Yeah.
Of fairness and equality.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's move on to unpacking
Okay.
the potential consequences
Right.
of this Pentagon memo.
Yeah.
We were just talking about how all of this, like this memo and everything, has a real human impact.
Yeah, totally.
It's not just policies on paper.
Yeah.
Right? It's people's lives.
Yeah.
And the consequences for transgender service members are very real.
So let's talk about that.
Okay.
What are we looking at here in terms of impact? Like, what are the potential consequences?
Well, as we said, those who can't meet those waiver requirements or choose not to
right.
are looking at forced separation from the military.
Yeah.
Which means losing their careers, their livelihoods, the whole community they've built.
Right. Right.
Within the armed forces.
It's a lot.
It's a huge loss. Yeah, on a lot of levels.
It's more than just a job for a lot of folks,
Well,
right?
Absolutely.
It's an identity.
Yeah.
A purpose.
You're right. Serving in the military, for a lot of people, it's more than just a paycheck.
Yeah.
It's about honor, duty, contributing to something larger than themselves.
Yeah.
To have that taken away because of who you are.
Right.
It's a devastating blow.
And then on top of that, there's the emotional and psychological toll, right?
Oh,
like this kind of scrutiny and uncertainty.
Yeah, to have your identity questioned like this. And your service.
Right.
And to face the possibility of being discharged.
Right.
For something so fundamental to who you are, you know.
Right.
That can be incredibly damaging.
It really can.
Imagine that stress. The anxiety of not knowing if you can keep serving.
Yeah.
The feeling of being targeted for something you can't control.
Right.
It can lead to feeling isolated, feeling worthless, even thoughts of self-harm.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking to think about.
Yeah, it is.
And the message this sends goes beyond just the military, right?
It does. It really does. It has broader implications, I think, for transgender rights and inclusion in American society as a whole.
Yeah.
When a group is singled out and told they're not fit to serve because of their gender identity, it sends a ripple effect through society, It
feels like we're taking a step back.
Yeah.
In terms of progress.
It does raise concerns about the direction we're heading.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder that this fight for transgender equality is far from over.
Yeah.
There's so much work to do to make sure that transgender individuals are treated with dignity, with respect, that their rights are protected, and they have the same opportunities as anyone else.
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
It is.
It's hard to know what the future even holds for transgender service members, given all of this.
It is. But one thing that is clear,
this
isn't going away anytime soon.
Right.
And it's crucial that we, as informed citizens, stay engaged with this conversation.
Yeah.
We need to understand the complexities, the nuances, the human stories at the heart of it all.
Yeah.
And we need to advocate for policies that are just and equitable for everyone.
You've given us a lot to think about.
Yeah.
I think it's time we start wrapping up this deep dive. But before we do, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought.
Okay.
We've covered a lot, haven't we? Yeah, we really have.
I mean, from the actual details of that Pentagon memo to the whole history of transgender people in the military.
Yeah.
And what it all means, for the bigger fight for transgender rights.
Right, the broader context.
Yeah. It's complicated, there's no doubt about it. But as I step back and kind of think about everything we've talked about, I keep coming back to this, this one question. Oh. What does the future hold?
Yeah.
Right. For transgender service members, what happens next?
That's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
And it really underscores why this deep dive is so important, I think.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just read the headlines.
Yeah. Right.
We have to engage with the details, the different viewpoints.
Right.
And most importantly, the human stories.
Yeah.
That are at the center of all of this.
Right.
And I think the future of transgender service members, it comes down to the choices we make.
Yeah.
The conversations we have, the actions we take.
It's hard to know, like, where to even begin, though, sometimes. I know what you mean. Like, where do we focus our energy?
Well, I think the first step is just, you know, staying informed.
Okay.
Keep learning about this issue. Follow what's happening.
Right.
You know, seek out different perspectives.
Right.
You know, the more we understand, the better we can advocate.
Right.
For policies that are, you know, fair and just.
And like you said about the different perspectives, like, it's important to remember there are a lot of different views on this, right?
Absolutely.
Like, even within the transgender community, there's not just one answer, and not everyone agrees on the best way forward.
Right, exactly. It's so important that we listen
to
transgender individuals.
Right.
You know, that we need to understand their experiences, their concerns, their hopes.
Yeah.
I mean, their voices should really be front and center in this conversation.
So beyond staying informed and listening,
to the people, you know,
yeah,
who are actually affected by this.
Right, right.
What can we do? What does action look like?
There are a number of things people can do. We can support organizations that are working to protect the rights of transgender service members. We can contact our elected officials and let them know how we feel.
Right.
And maybe most importantly, we can challenge discrimination and prejudice whenever we see it.
Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about transgender rights.
No, this is about human rights.
Yeah.
You know, this is about creating a society where everyone feels safe, respected, valued. Yeah. Well said. I think that's a perfect place to wrap things up. We talked a lot about the challenges, but we have to also acknowledge the strength and the resilience of transgender service members and their commitment to serving their country. You know, their stories are powerful and their fight deserves our attention and our support. So to you listening, you know, keep learning, keep listening, and keep engaging with this issue. It's important. The future isn't set in stone. We shape it together. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.